All right, welcome to a new episode of Bitcoin Train. As all of you know, my dear subscribers, this is not like a format that I usually do every week, like the video format, because I intend to record and to publish it only when I get to interview meaningful people who have a meaningful message to send, and they're worth it. And today we happen to have it. So I'm very happy to be joined today by David Bailey, the Chief Marketing Officer of Azteco. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
David.
Thank you.
David has basically a rich, and when I say rich, I mean very rich background in marketing. He having previously held positions in Apple and Samsung, and now he focuses on advancing basically Bitcoin adoption with Azteco. What's the topic of today? Why is David here? We will discuss about the essential idea that David expressed in an article. I think it was June. He published it in June, right? Yeah, in an article he published in June called "Why We Need Less Bitcoin with capital B and more Bitcoin with lowercase b." And we'll dive in what he means by that. Basically, the whole idea is that we have to, as you write, cross the chasm of Bitcoin adoption, and we'll try to understand what this means. But I'll start, if you agree, David, from the very basics. I would like to ask you a bit of your background. So you've been working, you worked in your past career with, as you said, Apple, Samsung. You write it in your own piece as well. Can you share with us a bit about your past career, and what is the thing or the idea or the friend or whatever that brought you into the Bitcoin space?
Yeah. So I've had a mixed background of product and marketing, technology and marketing. I've worked for kind of tech startups. I founded several tech startups. I've also worked for large companies. So I worked at Apple for 10 years. And I joined Apple in 2002, I think it was, when Apple was very small, very niche. Everybody thought it was me going to join some like weird little company. And I was there for 10 years during kind of the growth period, and I was responsible for kind of opening retail stores and retail partner kind of franchises around the world. And that was at the time when it was launching products that people didn't understand, didn't know about, like an iPad, an iPhone, all those kind of things. And if I look back through my career, I've always done technology and a way of explaining it to consumers so it's easy for them to understand. So make the complicated simple and make it desirable. I'd say that's kind of my common thread. I did it at Apple for 10 years. I did it at Samsung for several years. I've done it in startups. I've done it in scale-ups. The thing that breaks my heart, if I look back, go ahead.
No, I just then I let you go forward. But there's a thing I'm particularly curious about. What was the sentiment inside the company in Apple while you were launching what people thought would be maybe niche products at the very beginning, and then became massive product for the whole world? Because I think it could be interesting to compare what people thought inside Apple back at the time and what people are thinking of Bitcoin today.
Interesting. Yeah. So because we were on the inside at Apple, we could all see very quickly the adoption and the interest of the products. So we could see that retailers were signing up. We could see that when we went to a new country, they wanted the iPod. They wanted a whole shelf full of iPod. They wanted the accessories. So way before the sales started growing and growing and growing, we could see what was happening. We could see that in the hands of the right people, when you explained it properly, people were very excited. If you came along and said, here's an iPod, an MP3 player, or here's the iPad, it's an ebook. If you kind of presented it in a very technical way, people didn't get excited. But when you found the right way of saying, no, this is like a creative device, or this is like 1,000 songs in your pocket, you don't talk about the technology, you talk about the consumer use case, people get really excited, and then you start to see the adoption. And I do think that's where Bitcoin is today. If you search what is Bitcoin, you will get articles on what is the blockchain, how does the blockchain work, how does mining work. What is Bitcoin? It's a way for you to spend and save. It's a way for you to send funds across the other side of the world in seconds without paying any fees. And that's what I'm really passionate about with all the technology I've worked on, and with what I'm doing now at Azteco, is take this clever technology, demystify it, make it consumer friendly so that it can drive adoption.
It's interesting also the demystifying it part, because we live like in a moment in which, especially I have a past career in the mainstream media, unfortunately, in Italy, and obviously I witness, as everyone in this space witnesses, the misinformation about Bitcoin that gets funneled into the mass public. And so the demystifying part, do you think that the demystifying part is an essential part before getting to the mass adoption phase?
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand, because as you demystify something, it becomes interesting to more and more people. So the other example I use is, the internet way back 20, 25 years ago. And at the beginning, it was very technical, and people talked about it in technical terms, and people talked how it was going to revolutionize the way business worked. And for early adopters, the kind of the future-looking people, that's really interesting. For the mass people, they're like, this is like some weird technology. Why would I use it? I don't need it. And it's only when you start explaining to people, no, the internet lets you send emails, the internet lets you browse the web. You don't know how the internet works. My children at school, they get internet lessons, but nobody teaches them how VPN or DNS routers or IP addresses. Here's how you browse the internet safely. Here's how you do research on it. Here's how you use it. So I feel like that's the chasm where Bitcoin is at now. Like, we need to get away from how the technology works and into the mindset of like how people can use it safely for real day-to-day benefits.
Yeah. So let's get into it. In your article, you talk about the adoption life cycle from the early market to the mass market. I think we should start by explaining with your words what the adoption life cycle is and what its phases are.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to just share a couple of...
Yeah.
Do you see that okay?
Yeah.
Great. So there's a book which was written about 20 years ago called Crossing the Chasm. It's one of those books that has stood the test of time. Like any business book, it's not a magic formula, it's not a life hack, but it has a very good framework for thinking about these kind of things. And the essential idea is that you've got this, your market for customers is split into two parts. You've got like the early market on the left, which is about 15% of the total market for your product, your technology product would be considered early market. And then you've got 85%, which is considered the mass market. And you can kind of see it's in 5 little chunks. And then you've got this chasm in the middle. So breaking it down a little bit more, think about the early market as innovators and early adopters, kind of 2 life cycle phases. And then it goes into early majority, late majority, and the laggards. The innovators and the early adopters are, they're the people, the first people who started using the internet. It was a new technology. They wanted to figure out how it worked. Or it's the first people now using VR headsets and Apple Vision Pro. They're really interested in the technology, or smartphones or smartwatches. And I'm in this, personally, I'm definitely in this category for some things, not everything in life, you know, but I'll go out and try an electric car before everyone else has tried it. And those people are really interested in that product because they want to see how it works. They want to see what it can become. They kind of want to see, you know, how they can adapt the product or build on the product or help kind of promote the product, which is very different from this.
So they want to see what's behind the surface, right?
Yeah, they're interested in the underneath. They're interested in how it works, how it can be improved. You know, they're really happy to have a product which is a little bit rough around the edges. It's not perfect. That's okay. You know, that's part of the fun. It's like you get a product early and you kind of have to tinker and make it work. So that's the early market, which is quite a different mindset from then this mass market who they just want it to work right out of the box. You know, whatever that product is, they don't want to fiddle around setting things up or downloading patches or drivers. They just want it to work. You know, think about that with something like email. Again, you've got the innovators who were, you know, command line users of email probably, and early adopters who were figuring out kind of like the first email clients. But that's a very different mindset from the early majority who just want their computer to have an app. They just enter their OAR password and username, and then it just works. So early majority is less technical. They're more interested in the benefits than the technology. But this is where you can see, like, for consumer adoption and mass markets, it's this early majority, late majority, and then the laggards, you know, the people who eventually, 20 years later, start using the technology of email or the internet or whatever it might be. And then you have this awkward chasm in the middle. So I'll just pause there. Frederic, any questions or anything you want to kind of bring out on that?
Yeah. I mean, you said before that there are different, you know, interests in between the early market and the mass market. So in the Bitcoin case, how do you think? So we are now. First question.
Yeah.
In the Bitcoin adoption life cycle, where are we right now?
I would say we are right on the chasm. And
Okay.
before I answer your question about,
so we are basically approaching the end of the early adoption phase.
Yes, and the challenge for Bitcoin, like many innovative technologies, is to cross the chasm, hence the title of the book, and not get lost down in the middle. And by way of example, you know, these are the kind, this was a great technology. It was really fun to use. It was super clever. It had tremendous potential. You know, launched 2001, it was going to revolutionize transportation in cities. Okay, tourists and security guards use it, but it never really crossed the chasm into the mainstream. And 2020...
Why is that, in your opinion?
The reasons that the early adopters bought it, like the security guards or the tourists, was different from the mass market. Like the mass market, like, I just want to go to work. Am I allowed to, you know, the cities aren't existing that allow me to use this. You know, it's like people today say, I'm really happy, I want to pay with Bitcoin. Where can I pay with Bitcoin? Oh, there isn't anywhere for me to pay in a shop with Bitcoin. It's a bit like this. It's like I want to ride my Segway to work, but there isn't like a footpath that I'm allowed to ride it on. So the technology is there, but the way the mass market need to use it, they're not security guards or shopping mall guards. They want to use it in their day-to-day lives. So that, I think, is a good analogy with Bitcoin. Of like, yeah, I want to go into a shop and pay with Bitcoin, but I can't because there's a whole bunch of reasons why that's not the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah. So I can see the idea that we are approaching. We are basically almost in the middle of the chasm, as you said, but because I understand that there has been the very early innovators in the Bitcoin space, those who texted with Satoshi and on the mailing list, those who developed, the core developers and stuff, and also the early adopters. For example, myself, who discovered Bitcoin a bunch of years after its invention, but wanted to do journalism on it, or people who are building apps, wallets, which are year after year more user-friendly, more easy to use and stuff. Also, the first big asset managers get into in the ETFs, and so this is like the early adoption phase. How do you think? What's the best way to not getting lost in the chasm and start to get into the mass market?
Yeah. So the key is understanding that the people on one side of the chasm have totally different behaviors and interests and motivations to the other side of the chasm. So I'll show you just with a quick table, and I'll just flick past. There are some other examples here of things that got lost in the chasm. Google Glass, super clever, super innovative, changed the world, quietly lost in the chasm. 3D TV, great technology, content wasn't there, got lost in the chasm. VR headsets, where is that? Is that getting lost or is that crossing? You can have opinions on that. But the thing that I would say, cutting to the chase, early adopters think differently to the early majority. So these early adopters, they're interested in the technology. What can I do with it? Happy with minimal features, happy to help make it work. It's a different mindset from that early majority. And the early majority is like, I'm not interested in the technology. I want it to work. I want it to have benefits. I want it to just work out the box. I don't want to download other stuff. I want it to be easy. I don't, the early majority, they don't really care about privacy quite as much as the early adopters. Look how many people give their privacy away to Facebook every day. So you've got a totally different mindset. And the tactics that have worked with the early adopters to grow those first wave of customers, those tactics then don't work in the mainstream. And this is where marketeers try and do more of the early adopter marketing. And you run out of early adopters at some point. It's like, no, you need to switch up the messaging and the explanation and the education, because now we're talking to a different group with a different mindset.
Yeah. There are a few things that are a bit worrying, though. Like, I think open source is nightmare.
So I'm not saying I think that, but
yeah. No. I totally get it. Yeah, obviously it's not a priority for the mass market, and I totally get it. I mean, the mass market is already maybe, I think, ready to get involved in CBDCs and stuff. So they don't want privacy. They're not interested in those core values of the early adopters or the founders. I get it. Do you think that there could be a danger in it, in trying to build products with other priorities which are completely different from the ideas and the values that the founders had?
I don't think you build a different product. So let me be clear, open source is good, privacy is good, we should have it in there. But when you're trying to pull in this early majority, if the first headline on your website is open source wallet, that doesn't float the boat for the early majority. That's not what they want to see.
Yeah. So your point is that we need a different marketing strategy, basically.
Yes, it's messaging, it's communication. It needs to be open. Yes, I love open source. I love, just to be really clear, we need privacy. We need all these things. But then when we package it up and present it to this, 100 million next Bitcoin users who think differently and value things differently, we need to emphasize the ease of use. We need to emphasize the usefulness. We need to emphasize the day-to-day use cases of it. Doesn't mean we're dumbing it down at all. Doesn't mean we're diluting the product or the technology. If you want Bitcoin to win and be adopted as we all want it to be. You just got to change up your messaging and talk to people a bit differently. Not with the language of like, I'm going to orange pill you into the early adopter mindset. That's the wrong way. And this is where lots of tech companies get lost in the middle, because they've talked to this early adopter audience, they've found resonance, they've found acceptance, and then they can't understand why these people on the other side of the chasm just don't respond to the same messaging and the same features and the same things.
So, extremely interesting, honestly. What do you think could be the messages that could resonate with the early majority kind of audience? Because it's interesting to think that Bitcoin poses itself as I'd say an alternative to the current financial system. And many people basically don't even know what the financial system, how the financial system works. So obviously they're not interested in how Bitcoin works, and that makes completely sense. But the current financial system, especially in the Western world, in the advanced and developed world, already offers, payment apps or methods to easily send money from one country to another if you're in the EU or in North America, obviously not in other regions. What are the messages in which you could, make people understand that Bitcoin in some way is better even for the mainstream use cases of the financial system, sending remittances, paying retail stores or online or whatever?
So the way we focus on this is we focus, we tell stories about how people like you are using Bitcoin to do the things that you do, and then you can kind of open that up very easily and go, people like you are sending money to family and friends all over the world. So like last year, $669 billion of remittances were sent around the world. People sending money back. They're working in the US or they're working in Mexico and they're sending it everywhere. So people who are doing that, it's like, hey, here's a use case where you could send money, funds to your family and friends wherever. It happens instantly. There's no fees. They can off ramp it with, Bitrefill or something like that, so they can use it. So when you explain the use case there, people are suddenly really interested in Bitcoin, because it's like, actually, I can see how I can use it to do, to pay a freelancer or to be paid by a freelancer or to send money to people. Now, for somebody like me sitting in the UK with, allegedly a stable financial system, that's not as interesting, perhaps, as if somebody who is in the US trying to send money back to Mexico, or if you're living in Argentina, Brazil, several Latin American countries where there is decades of history of financial uncertainty. My friends I know who live in South Africa, they won't save in the local currency. They've got bank accounts, they're middle class, but they won't put their savings in the South African rand because they believe it's corrupt. So for them, they'll put it into Bitcoin because they see that as like a safe way of saving. So it's kind of finding these day-to-day use cases of like, hey, people like you are saving $10 a month in Bitcoin because they're saving for a trip around the world, or they're saving for their college fund. And the more we can make the messaging about people are using Bitcoin for all these little bits of life, spending and saving and sending, it becomes much more normal. Whereas at the moment, the media line is like, what's the price of Bitcoin? How high is Bitcoin going? What's the latest crypto scam or fraud?
Sure.
So we just ignore all of that and we just go, let's find all the people who you can relate to, who are doing things like you do, but doing it with Bitcoin.
Definitely. And even in the media, there are still like big newspapers who treat Bitcoin like it is still like the shadowy super cool thing. So it gives shade to it. Interesting, especially in Italy, but I think that also at an international level, there's a debate and it's the debate between like the hodl maximalists still and because while living in a as you said correctly, allegedly advanced economy and safe economy, you get lower inflation if compared to Argentina or Turkey or whatever. And so people, unfortunately, still save money in euros, dollars, pounds in their bank accounts. And so the idea of the best use case of Bitcoin in this economical area of the world still is the store of value one, because you don't have, let's say, the very need to use it in day-to-day transactions, because your financial system allegedly works. So in Italy, there's a debate that it's spreading quite a bit between the hodl maximalists and the one who are called the spend and replace. Those who support this idea, because also spending and replace, especially with the Lightning Network, you're basically supporting companies who are building on the Lightning Network through routing fees and stuff. And so you're incentivizing the spreading of the Lightning economy. Do you think this kind of debate could go against the economic incentives? And I mean, exactly for our kind of economy, in which you could and you can basically spend money with your credit card, or spend money with your wire transfer or whatever, with no excess costs, with no enormous costs. And while saying people, you just have to save money, buy Bitcoin, leave it there for 4, 8, 10 years or 15 years or whatever, and then gain profits. Do you think that the idea of I don't know, maybe incentivizing people, telling people you could use Bitcoin into your day-to-day transactions, you could use Bitrefill, you could go to the local merchant who accepts Bitcoin, use Bitcoin, because in that way you're incentivizing the Bitcoin economy, could be a good message, this one, or could it be damaging because it disincentivize the market incentives of basically saving money in Bitcoin and spending the dirty fiat money?
Yeah, it's a really good question. A couple of layers to it. One thing I feel very strongly is, if everybody just focuses on getting a bit of Bitcoin and kind of stashing it away and holding it, it's not going to work. It's not going to reach its potential. All the people who, like, here's a stat: 1 billion adults in the world have a smartphone but don't have a bank account. There's 1 billion adults who could use Bitcoin today instead of a bank account because they've got internet, electricity, and smartphone. But if everybody just focuses on the price of Bitcoin and holding Bitcoin, and nobody helps to make it a day-to-day payment method, everybody's store of wealth won't be worth anything eventually, because something else will come along and take that place of day-to-day payment method. So I also refer back to the original white paper was, electronic cash for day-to-day small payments. It wasn't like a store of wealth, the gold standard. It can be those things as well. I feel there's enough people focusing on it being a store of wealth and a gold standard. It's like, what I want to encourage is all the people who can come and help make it a day-to-day payment method. Because if we get millions and millions of people able to use it for day-to-day payments, that'll keep it going. Anyone who's saved in Bitcoin, it will keep the price going. But you can't have one without the other. And I feel like it's balanced at the moment more towards investing, stacking, holding. And we're trying to shove it the other way and go, look at all the day-to-day things. And that's kind of the origin story of Azteco, really, is how can we help drive consumer adoption of Bitcoin? How can we make it easy for people to use Bitcoin? And our bit of that is to make it as easy as possible for people to just get $10 of Bitcoin. They don't need to open an exchange account. They don't need a bank account. They don't need ID. They can pay by cash. That's our bit of like, let's help drive consumer adoption with the on-ramp. And then we love talking to the people who are like, make Bitcoin wallets, making them really easy and user-friendly, and the people who are doing the off-ramps, and, the people who are helping to make it possible to pay in Bitcoin in a store. I feel like those are the real heroes. Anyone who's driving acceptance of Bitcoin as a payment solution for businesses, that's where like we really need to put a lot of creative energy, in my opinion.
At what point are we at right now in those kind of solutions? Because let's get into. I know it's we're basically doing the exact opposite of what we were saying at the beginning. So focusing on the message, but I want you to delve a little bit into the technical debate right now, because a lot of subscribers are also very interested in the technical aspects. There's been a huge debate about the actual success of the Lightning Network and other solutions have risen, like Arc. They are building on it. They are building solutions, starting with the first clients on Arc. Do you think the Lightning Network will be the definitive, the final protocol for day-to-day use, or are there better solutions in your opinion?
With these kind of questions, I'm always reminded of VHS versus Betamax. And the one that is technically superior doesn't always win. Betamax was technically superior technology, VHS won. And you have to think about that with a lot of technology. It's like, it's not just the pure technology, it's the adoption, it's the deployment. So if businesses find it easier to use Lightning to receive payments, businesses will go that route. There might be an alternative to Lightning, which is 10% better or 20% better. But if it's harder to actually deploy as a business, this is the business adoption of Bitcoin. How can I run a hotel. How can I accept Bitcoin from my customers? How can I let them pay? And it's not just a case of get wallet to Satoshi and Breeze and do a point of sale and scan a QR code.
Yeah.
There's a whole financial operational process of like, well, where do I store my Bitcoin? And how do I, my bank accounts, my business bank accounts, there's clear controls and dual signatures. And so I feel like, I'm sure there is something better than Lightning, and whatever, there'll be something better than that and better than that. The internet is built on HTML, and there has to be something better than HTML for web pages.
Sure
But
thing.
that's the one that has gained traction because people made it easy for businesses to publish in HTML. You could have argued Flash was better, but so it's that, to me, I think of it that way. It's like, yeah, technically there might be something better, but the real question is, how can we make it easier for businesses to use Bitcoin? Because that's the big missing step, I think, at the moment.
There are also the regulatory changes that step in the way of easy of use and convincing basically merchants and other businesses to adopt this kind of technology, because at least from my experience, a lot of fear. In Italy, we have a messy law. It's almost impossible to comply. Every time you buy a pizza with Bitcoin, you have to, if you, let's say this pizza costs 10 euros, you have to think as you're selling 10 euros of Bitcoin and calculate the minus or plus that you're doing to do the tax report at the end of the year. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. It's impossible to comply. So also the regulatory challenges are involved in this. Just one question. I don't know if you follow along the politics debate. This is the first big year of U.S. elections in which Bitcoin is, I wouldn't say a main character, but a character for sure. How do you think this could be perceived from the public opinion? The idea that there's Trump that wants to endorse Bitcoin and all his shit coins and NFTs and stuff, and there's Harris that basically noticed it and started to say that the US will be the main driver of the digital assets adoption and stuff. Do you think this will be good for Bitcoin perception or detrimental to it, because Bitcoin is not that easy to understand and usually politics doesn't delve into proper topics?
The fact that the presidential candidates are both talking about it is a huge step forward from 4 years ago, 8 years ago. It's a topic of discussion. So that to me is progress of some sort. One of them might be like more negative, but like they're talking about it in the same way that BlackRock offering, Bitcoin ETFs, that's like huge progression from, 4 or 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. BlackRock ETFs is still for a kind of a wealthy customer base. It's not the day-to-day consumer adoption, but it begins to normalize it in people's mind of like, oh, I hear Bitcoin being talked about in a presidential debate. I hear Bitcoin being talked about on Wall Street. Instead of, I hear Bitcoin being talked about with scams. I hear Bitcoin being talked about with hacks. So I feel like it is good progress that it's part of the conversation. I feel like it kind of a lot of it comes down to, in different parts of the world, voters have been given the choice between more regulation in their life and less regulation. Bitcoin is one part of that, but there's many other aspects where some European countries are really going into like, no, don't worry, we'll look after every part of your life for you. We'll take care of this, we'll take care of whether you want to or not, we will take care of this and this and this and this, because you're going to. So there's like a bigger thing.
There's this meme, right, that the US innovates, China copies, EU regulates.
Yeah. But now within the EU, you've got some of the countries swimming in the other direction and like, no, actually, we're going to have a reaction against this, and we don't want regulation, and we don't want to be told what to do. Which fundamentally was the root cause of Brexit, whether you agree with that or not. It's like people don't want to have every bit of their life micromanaged and planned. They want to have a bit of freedom. So I think there's a lot of people who would like to understand and explore and have the option to use Bitcoin, not because they want to, overthrow Western governments and like break the banking system. It's like, I just want to try using this. Why can't I use it? Why do I not have the right to actually try using this? So, I do think the fact that the presidential candidates are talking about Bitcoin is a good thing. I just wish I could change the narrative so they're not talking about it as an investment, but they're talking about it as it's a payment method for small electronic payments. That was the white paper, and get more people to think of it that way.
Nice, yes. Rolling back a bit about the tools you mentioned, for example, Wallet of Satoshi, Breeze. There's also a bunch of amazing Lightning wallets today. I love Phoenix. I love Async, and there's good tools today.
Yeah.
Maybe not as good as we need to get the mass market, the proper mass market. Where do you think are we in the tool building phase of preparing the entrance in the mass market? Are we ready? Are we preparing to getting ready? How many years, if you have a time span, do we need to have the tools ready to onboard the next billion people?
Yeah. So again, I think back to the early days of the internet, where if you want to build a web page, the tool is, a text editor and an HTML handbook, and it's like, off you go, and, use your Apache server, and you're building it all yourself. In the same way that some Lightning wallets today, they're brilliant, but the first step is set up a Lightning node, which is not what, that's great, early adopter. Now, if you want to do a website, it's like, well, there's a million kind of pre-built ways, and yeah, they're not as absolutely perfect as a hand-coded one, but you know, there's 100 million more websites that exist because you've got something like Squarespace. So I think on the wallet side, because this is the question we get most often from people, is like, how do I manage, where do I keep my Bitcoin? I don't want it on the exchange. Where do I, and when you tell them there's an app, they're like, really? There isn't like all this cold wallet mining thing I hear. Like, no, it's just download an app and then. So the apps that the two companies that I think are interesting in that space, the wallet space, is Foundation and BitKey, because they are both doing, you look at their products, you look at their messaging, they're very clearly looking forward. BitKey says it in their own words, the next 100 million Bitcoin users. You know, what's the wallet for the next 100 million Bitcoin users, which has the optional security of a fingerprint device, a hardware piece if you want it or not. So both of those have kind of done wallets, very consumer-friendly wallet solution, launched them in the last 6-9 months. Neither of them have Lightning yet, because like non-custodial Lightning is quite a challenge, but
yes,
I think we will see that coming. So I think there are companies taking a, you know, ease of use approach, you know, making it, not dumbing it down, not making it custodial or any kind of hacky things, but just like the early adopters, I want it to work out of the box. I want it to work like all the other apps I download. And I want it to use language that's familiar to me, because when you start talking about Bitcoin nodes in my wallet, it makes me feel stupid because I don't understand it. And then so it's those kind of things. It's just make it user-friendly, make it a bit less technical, a bit more user-friendly. But so I definitely see that progress happening, you know, Foundation, BitKey, I'm sure there's some others out there as well. One of these USB keys is like, no, it's the kind of thing you'd use with your bank app and a fingerprint device or something like that. So I think that is a huge piece that I see moving forward in the next 12, 18 months.
12, 18 months. So you think we could be, you know, ready for mass market in 12, 18 months?
I think the wallet piece of it, because this is where we look at like, okay, on-ramp, how do I get my Bitcoin? How do I manage my Bitcoin? How do I spend my Bitcoin? Those are the 3 steps we think about. And
yes,
we at Azteco think we've got the first one covered. Like, how do I get my Bitcoin? Well, you can buy an Azteco Bitcoin voucher because you don't need an account and you don't need a bank account and all those things. The wallet piece, I see several people starting to build things which are very user-friendly and private and safe. The bit I don't know about, and I would love to talk to people about more, is how do we make it easier for businesses to adopt Bitcoin, because that'll make it easier for consumers to spend their Bitcoin. And I love what people like Bitrefill are doing in creating an off-ramp. So if I'm in the US and I want to send $50 to my family, or I want to send $50 to my sister for her studies, you know, I can send it as Bitcoin. She gets it, turns it into an Airbnb card or, you know, local food card, done. But it's and I know from my business background days running retail stores, it's like, it's really hard to add another currency. You know, like if the stores in Italy said, we're going to accept US dollars as a payment, it's like, oh, we've got to have 2 price lists. We've got to think about converting. We've got to think about how we store it. And so I feel like I'm really hoping there's some people working on that piece of the puzzle, of making the business adoption easier as well.
Yeah. I would like to get back a bit and talk again about the adoption life cycle, because one thing I got into thinking about is that are there differences in the adoption life cycles of products and technologies which are more protocols than products, because you did the example of the iPod, of the iPhone, and then rightfully so talked about the internet. Bitcoin is obviously way more comparable to the internet than a single product. Are there differences in these kind of adoption life cycles, or from a product to a protocol, or are they similar?
So I think it's a good question. I think the more, fundamentally, Bitcoin and the internet have so much more potential to redefine our futures than Amazon Echo. Think of voice activated speakers when they first came out. It was earlier, that was the adoption curve. It was the early technology users because they could do geeky things with it. And then eventually people realized that they can set their kitchen timers with Alexa, and they can ask for their music.
Yeah.
And it works because Amazon is basically subsidizing it and shoving it out through their channels. So, but Alexa and voice operated speakers, it's a convenience, it's a convenience level up. But look at what Bitcoin and the internet offer. That's like so much more fundamental of the potential for change. That could change economies and business flows. So I think the bigger the scope of potential change and impact, the more layered the adoption curve is. For getting Alexa adopted, just make sure that Amazon are selling it on their website, on their homepage at like half the price it costs, and it will go.
Yeah.
The internet, you've got to show people why they should sign up for an internet connection, which, 25 years ago, it's like, really? I'm going to pay £20 for what, to like look at websites? Why would I do that?
Yeah. Back at the time, Bill Gates said he dreamed about having a laptop inside every home. They all considered him a fool. It was mental.
So the other comment he makes, which I like a lot, is we tend to underestimate the impact of technology overestimate it in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. And I think of that. That was absolutely true with the internet. Like massive excitement took a while. It got there. It's the same today with AI. I think like people are overestimating its impact in the next 6 months, but underestimating its impact in the next 10 years.
Interesting. Very interesting. Maybe it's also like a human thing, because when you encounter something and you get excited about it, you tend to think that it's going to revolutionize everything in 1 year or in 6 months, and then it doesn't happen, and you get pessimistic about the future. It could be like also a human thing.
And so it is a human thing, and that adoption life cycle is completely human. It's basically the way humans operate at different levels, and some people absolutely want the newest technology to tinker with it and figure out how it works, and that's brilliant. And then some people is like, no, I'll have it when I need to have it, or when I'm the only one of my friends who's not using it, or something like that. So I think that adoption curve is purely about human nature, and the chasm thing is when we don't adjust how we talk for a different group of people. If you're selling something to Italians versus Germans, the sales pitch you use on the Italians is probably going to be very different from the Germans, because there's a different culture, there's a different mindset. Some things will be the same. So I think it comes down to just what I would say is good marketing, which is talk to the customer. Don't preach the thing that you want to preach. Here's our technology with feature A, feature B, feature C, which we're really proud of because we spent a lot of time working on these features. So the customer doesn't care about the features you built. They care about what they can do. So I spent a couple of years working for Samsung SmartThings 10 years ago when they were first rolling out smartphones.
Yeah.
And again, classic crossing the chasm at the beginning. It was people who were so excited about Zigbee and Z-Wave devices in their home and being able to have like over 100 connected sensors in their home. You know, clearly early adopters, and none of that messaging, you know, infinite possibilities, write your own routines at home. All of that messaging worked for the early adopters, and it just fell flat with the rest of the mass market. And that's what we did there. Was like, okay, it's still the same technology, but we're going to package it a different way. We're going to explain it a different way of how it makes a difference in your life, not how clever it is. And that's why I talk about less Bitcoin and more Bitcoin, because capital B Bitcoin is the technology.
Yeah.
Lowercase b is the unit of value, the utility. And it's like, let's talk more about the day-to-day unit value of Bitcoin for spending and saving. Let's stop talking about the technology, the blockchain. And it's funny, internet, you know, internet and web, those had capital letters at the beginning. And then at some point it just becomes like a ubiquitous term. Nobody puts internet with a capital I now, or World Wide Web in capital letters. It's like, once it becomes familiar to people, you don't. Somebody, a keen RCO says, Bitcoin has to become boring for it to become ubiquitous. It's got to be just like, I get it. It's like, it's got to just be like a day-to-day thing of like, oh yeah, my cousin uses Bitcoin when they go on holiday, or yeah, my sister sends me some money with Bitcoin, or my son. It's like, it's not like,
yeah, we're not there yet. So when I meet new people and they ask me, what do you do? I just tell them, yeah, I do use it on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis. I do my grocery shopping with Bitcoin. They are like shocked. They don't believe it. It's incredible. So we're far from that, I believe. I think, So I would like to end this conversation with a forecast. Worst case scenario and best case scenario. We do the best case scenario across the chasm, and we do reach mass adoption in how many years if everything goes in the best way possible. And worst case scenario, we do not cross the chasm, and we still and we remain like a niche technology for early adopters. When we will be, you know, able to realize this?
I think it's like it's a slow thing. It doesn't like, you know, it's not like one morning you realize you've crossed or not crossed. It's like, I think if you see, one of the things I worry about is, you know, central bank digital currencies. And like, if we leave space for governments to justify that they need to create their own digital currencies, it's like, don't worry, it's just like Bitcoin, but it's run by your government. We've created it. It's not that scammy thing over there. It's our version. Then you've lost so many of the benefits of Bitcoin because it's back to being controlled by political parties again for economic reasons. So personally, I feel like if anybody starts, any Western European kind of, you know, starts rolling out CBDC, I'd be like, we've let them get ahead on that. That would be like, now it doesn't mean that Bitcoin dies straight away, but it kind of narrows the use case of Bitcoin. It's not day-to-day spending for everybody, because, you know, my government's just given me a digital currency here. Then Bitcoin becomes more of it's more like a financial asset commodity type thing that has its uses, but perhaps more in a strategic investment portfolio sense, in the same way that people hold gold. So I don't think it will ever, I think it's too far on that it will ever be like Bitcoin just stops and dies and disappears and is that's not going to happen.
No. It could be, maybe it could remain also as an alternative. Things that people cannot do with CBDC, they will do with Bitcoin and stuff.
The thing is, if somebody starts rolling out, it's a bit like Microsoft when they roll out a feature. I worked at a company for a while that did calendar scheduling software, and they did like state of the art for businesses, calendar scheduling with like really high tech. And then Microsoft came along and did calendar scheduling of like the bare minimum. And they weren't trying to like compete. They were just wanting to be able to say, we do calendar scheduling, so you don't need to go somewhere else. And I worry the same with the CBDCs. You don't need to go and use that Bitcoin because we got you covered over here with our flavor. And guess what? It's nowhere near as good. It's nowhere near as deep. It's nowhere near as potential. But for a lot of people, it's like, I can use a digital currency. But then you're into, well, how do you open a bank account in that digital currency? What paperwork do you need? What happens one day when the government doesn't like your kind of person and starts blocking bank accounts? And again, if you live in Latin America, this is not like the stuff of history or fiction. This is the kind of thing that comes around every couple of years.
It could be, a useful thing for Bitcoin to have a huge bureaucratical friction in using CBDCs and stuff.
Yeah. It could be, in the same way that like if you had some economic crisis with the US dollar, that would really help Bitcoin. But that's so I wouldn't
more of a long-term thing.
Yeah. So I think it's still in for play. Bitcoin is what it is, but it has the potential to be so much more if we get it being used on the other side of the chasm, which means we have to think and talk and focus on things a bit differently, which is why I'm kind of preaching, as it were. And hence the less Bitcoin capital B and more lowercase Bitcoin day-to-day usage.
Yeah. Nice. Very interesting. What a time to be alive, David. Very interesting times ahead. David, thank you so much for...
We should do this in 5 years' time and look back at this interview.
Definitely. And cry if Bitcoin hasn't crossed the chasm, or drink champagne if it has.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. I will sign it on my calendar. Speaking of calendars, David, thank you so much for having accepted my invite. It's been, I think, a very meaningful conversation. I hope you guys, your subscribers, like this conversation, because as I said before, especially in Italy, there's these huge debate between just saving Bitcoin, or saving, but only, trying to spend not your entire net worth in Bitcoin, but just a little amount of money of Satoshis to get your groceries or to, for your car, and then in this way you're incentivizing the mass adoption. So David, thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and hope to have a nice time in 5 years' time to celebrate the Bitcoin adoption. Thank you again.
Thank you.